My name is Jack, and I've been a truck driver for 12 years. I haul cargo across state lines for big grocery chains and distribution centers that never sleep. Most of the time, it's food. Sometimes it's fuel. Sometimes it's whatever keeps the shelves full, so other people don't have to think about where things come from. I've been married a long time, and I've got one kid who's smarter than I ever was at that age. That's the whole reason I stay on the road as much as I do. College is expensive, and pride doesn't pay tuition. Every mile I drive is part of a bigger plan, even if it doesn't feel big when I'm sitting in traffic or waiting on a dock at 2 in the morning. I spend most of my days alone in the cab. I've driven through more places than I can count. Big cities, small towns, and long stretches of highway where it feels like nothing exists but asphalt and sky. I've watched places grow, and I've watched others fade. Some towns look like they're still holding on, others look like they already let go. After a while, you get good at noticing that kind of thing. I keep my logbook clean and up to date. Miles, fuel, stops, delivery times, everything written down the way it's supposed to be. Paperwork matters in this line of work. People ask if driving gets boring. I tell them no, it gets comfortable. I've got plenty of stories from the road, enough to keep someone awake longer than they planned. Most of them are harmless, a few are strange. All of them happened while I was just doing my job, and if you really want to know where it all started, the long night I still think about, it started because of my love of pancakes. The road settles into patterns if you drive it long enough, and that's usually where stories begin. You learn which exits are worth taking and which ones aren't. You learn where the decent bathrooms are, which stations keep the pumps running late, and which diners won't look at you funny if you walk in at 3 in the morning wearing a jacket that smells like diesel. Over time, you stop experimenting and start returning to the places that treat you right. That's how I ended up at Matilda's. Matilda's sits just off Highway 50, far enough from the road that you don't hear traffic unless you're listening for it. The sign out front is old, showing a cartoon woman holding a coffee pot and smiling with big white teeth. The lights buzz a little at night, but they always stay on. I've been stopping there for about 3 years, whenever my route lines up right, and I've never once seen the place closed. It isn't fancy. The vinyl booths are cracked in places, and I'm pretty sure they haven't been reupholstered since the 1980s. The tables wobble if you lean on them wrong. There's a jukebox in the corner that only plays 3 songs, and 2 of them skip in the same spot every time. Nobody bothers to fix it. That's just part of how the place sounds now. What matters is the food. Matilda's makes their pancakes from scratch. You can tell. They don't come out uniform or perfectly round. The edges are uneven, and they soak up butter the way pancakes are supposed to. No pre-made batter that tastes like it came off a shelf. The plate arrives hot, steam rolling off it, and nobody rushes you. The coffee comes with free refills, no questions asked, and the mugs are thick enough that you don't burn your hands. For a trucker who lives on the 2 C's, carbs and caffeine, it's about as close to perfect as you're going to get. That's why I kept coming back. No mystery to it. If you find a place that feeds you well and doesn't give you trouble, you remember it. I usually came in late, sometimes just before midnight, sometimes closer to dawn. Matilda's never seemed to care. The same waitresses worked most nights, and they knew me well enough that I didn't have to order out loud. Pancakes, extra butter, coffee. It took a while before I noticed anything strange. There's a booth near the back wall, 7th from the counter, if you count left to right. Booth 7. For the longest time, I didn't pay attention to it. Then one night, I noticed a man sitting there. The next time I came back, he was there again. He wore a trench coat, even in summer. It was dark. He also wore a hat that looked like it came straight out of an old detective movie, pulled low over his face. The most noticeable thing was the sunglasses, thick lenses, dark enough that you couldn't see his eyes at all. He wore them no matter the time or weather. A newspaper was always open in front of him. At first, I figured he was just another regular. Every diner has one. But over time, it became hard to ignore how consistent he was. Different days, different hours, sometimes weeks apart. He was always there in booth 7. Same coat, same hat, same paper, same posture. I never saw him eat. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me, and I asked one of the waitresses about him. Her name was Linda, and she'd been working there longer than I'd been stopping in. I nodded toward booth 7 and asked if the guy ever left. She glanced over, shrugged, and said he was waiting for somebody. She said it like she'd said it 100 times before. According to her, he always ordered the same thing: black coffee, no cream, no sugar. He'd sit for hours, pay his tab, and leave. Then, sooner or later, he'd be back. Nobody knew who he was waiting for. Not long after that, I noticed the marks on his arms. If you passed his booth on the way to the restroom, you could see them where his sleeves pulled back. Dark, uneven patches that looked like old burns. Not fresh, but not faded either. He didn't hide them. He also didn't seem to care who saw. I kept my distance. It wasn't my business. One night, as I was heading out, I saw him stand up from the booth. He moved stiffly, like someone who wasn't used to sitting that long. As he passed by, something slipped from his briefcase and landed on the floor near my feet. He didn't notice. He pushed through the door and was gone before I could say anything. I picked it up. It was a brochure, old, the print faded, but readable. It advertised a fallout bunker, the kind sold in the late 1950s and early 1960s. Backyard installation, reinforced walls, long-term supplies, protection for the whole family. I recognized it right away. My grandfather had shown me something similar when I was a kid, talking about the Cold War and what people were afraid of back then. The dates matched that era. I stood there for a moment, waiting to see if the man would come back. He didn't. I asked Linda if she'd seen him leave. She said she hadn't noticed, so I folded the brochure and slipped it into my jacket pocket. I figured I'd give it back if I saw him again. I finished my coffee, paid the check, and went back to the truck. The next week passed the way most weeks do on the road, measured in miles, delivery windows, and whatever food I could grab between stops. When my route brought me back near Highway 50, I didn't even think about where I was stopping. I pulled off the exit, parked where I always did, and walked into Matilda's. The night was quiet. Inside, everything looked the same. Same booths, same jukebox, same smell of coffee and butter. I ordered my usual and took my time. The pancakes were just as good as ever. I drank more coffee than I needed and lost track of how late it was getting. Eventually, I felt like stepping outside. Matilda's didn't mind if you took your coffee with you, as long as you brought the mug back. I walked out the side door and leaned against the wall, looking up at the sky. Away from the highway lights, you could see more stars than people expect. I stood there thinking about the next leg of the drive, how the trailer was loaded, which stores needed priority, how long it would take to reach the next town. Then I turned the corner behind the diner. The lights were dimmer there, just enough to see the dumpsters lined against the wall. Standing near them was the man from booth 7. The trench coat hung differently now, looser, like it no longer fit his frame. He was bent forward at an angle that didn't look comfortable. His back curved more than I remembered. For a moment, I told myself it was nothing. My kid has scoliosis, and I've learned not to jump to conclusions. People carry pain in different ways. I stepped closer, thinking I might ask if he needed help. Before I could speak, he bent further and vomited onto the pavement. What hit the ground wasn't anything I recognized. It wasn't liquid. It came out thick and black, piling onto itself before it began to move. It writhed against the concrete, slick and heavy, like something alive, reminding me of an arrow squid twisting through its own ink. I stood there, coffee in my hand, trying to understand what I was seeing. The man straightened slowly, reached into his coat, and wiped his mouth with a handkerchief. For just a second, his sunglasses slipped. I saw his eyes. There were 5 of them, scattered across his pale face and damp forehead. They blinked, but not together. Each one moved on its own. I didn't wait to see more. I pressed myself against a maintenance door as he turned in my direction. He adjusted his sunglasses and walked past me without slowing. I listened as he crossed the lot. A car door opened, then shut. An engine started. I watched him drive away in an old blue Chevy, heading back toward the highway. I stood there for a long moment after that. When I finally looked back, the black thing had shifted closer to the shadows between the dumpsters. Then it slid out of sight. I went back inside. I didn't finish my coffee. I paid the check, nodded to Linda, and left without saying much. I got back in the truck and started the engine. After that night behind the diner, I changed my eating habits without ever really deciding to. I told myself it was just timing, that my deliveries hadn't lined up with Highway 50 for a while. But that wasn't the whole truth. I stayed busy. I took longer routes. I stopped at places I didn't care much about. I ate fine. I drank plenty of coffee. I just didn't go back to Matilda's. A full week passed before my schedule brought me close again, and by then it was impossible to miss. I saw the lights from nearly a mile away, red and blue flashing against the dark, reflecting off the empty road. When I took the exit, the parking lot was blocked by police cars and yellow tape. The windows were boarded up, rough plywood nailed over the glass. The sign was still there, but the lights were off. I parked farther back than usual and walked up. One of the officers stepped forward before I could get close. He was young, maybe mid-20s, wearing a jacket that still looked stiff and new. His name tag read Jim. "Evening, sir. Place is closed," he said. "I can see that," I replied. "I'm a regular. I stop here a lot. What happened?" He hesitated, glanced over his shoulder, then looked back at me. "You with the owner?" I shook my head. "No, just a regular. Been coming here for about 3 years. Pancakes and coffee." Jim sighed and looked at the building. "All right. You might as well hear it. Can't hurt at this point." A couple days earlier, the assistant cook hadn't shown up for his shift. Older guy, kept to himself, never missed a day before. The waitress reported it, Jim said. 6 hours went by, no call. That wasn't like him. "So you searched the place," I said. "Yeah, front to back. He scratched his head. When we opened the freezer, we found him. Dead. No signs of trauma. Nothing obvious. He explained that the freezer door was too heavy for one person to open or close from the inside. That was why they always had multiple cooks working, even in such a small diner. And that wasn't even the strangest part, Jim continued. The freezer was full, floor to ceiling, arrow squid, just squid. That doesn't make sense, I said. That's what we thought. This place serves bacon and pancakes. They don't use squid for anything. He added that they'd found more squid in the cook's car, trunk and front seat, and even more in his personal locker out back. Same thing. No explanation. I didn't say anything for a moment. Jim watched me closely. You look like you're trying to remember something. There was a man who sat here a lot, I said. Back booth, wore a trench coat. Jim shook his head. We didn't find anyone like that. You talking about a suspect? I don't know, I said. Just someone I noticed. Jim let out a slow breath. We don't know what this is yet. Could be someone sick. Could be someone making a point. Right now, it's just the strangest case we've had around here. I looked past him at the boarded windows and asked if the diner would reopen. It will, Jim said. Different name, new owner, interior update, same building. Most of the staff were staying on. Jobs were hard to come by, and people held on to the ones they had. I nodded. I understood. The case never went anywhere after that. It stayed in the local news for a while, short updates that all said the same thing. No suspects, no clear cause, no explanation that made sense on paper. Eventually, something else replaced it. A different story, a different problem. That's how it usually works. Matilda's stayed boarded up for a few months. Then the signs came down. The plywood disappeared. A new name went up, painted clean and bright. Someone fixed the lights and replaced the booths. The jukebox didn't come back. I heard the decor looked nicer, more modern, like someone was trying to make the place forget what it used to be. Most of the people stayed on. The waitresses, the dishwasher, the cook who took over the missing man's shifts. You could update the walls and menus, but the work stayed the same. I figured that if I ever stopped there again, I'd see the man in the trench coat sitting in booth 7 like nothing had happened. Same posture, same newspaper, same black coffee. Some things don't leave just because a place changes its name. I never went back to find out. I adjusted my routes whenever I could. If Highway 50 showed up on my schedule, I made sure I passed through without stopping. I didn't tell anyone why. There are plenty of diners out there, plenty of places to get pancakes if you really want them. Still, every now and then, when I drove past that exit at night, I checked my mirrors a little longer than usual. Once or twice, I thought I saw an old blue Chevy hanging back on the road behind me. It never followed all the way. It always turned off before I did, just far enough back that I couldn't be sure. That wasn't the last strange thing I ran into on the job. Not even close. If you drive long enough, you collect stories. The next one happened months later, in a place that wasn't on my regular route at all. Yellowfield. After Matilda's, I went back to driving the way I always had, letting the road decide what came next. A few months later, one of my deliveries took me through Nebraska. That didn't happen often. My usual work kept me farther south and west, but every now and then a shipment changed, and I ended up somewhere new. That's one of the things I still like about this job. You can drive the same highways for years, then suddenly the land changes around you, and it feels like starting fresh. Yellowfield is one of those places. You see it long before you reach it. Miles of cornfields stretch out on both sides of the road, flat and open as far as the eye can go. In the right light, the fields look like an ocean, yellow and gold, moving gently when the wind passes through. The town sits right in the middle of it. Yellowfield is an old farming town, around since the early 1930s. Corn has always been its backbone. Everything there traces back to planting, harvesting, storing, and selling corn in one form or another. There's one major grocery store where I made my delivery, a big concrete building that services the whole area. Aside from that, the town mostly takes care of itself. Small shops, local farms, people who know each other's names and don't feel the need to rush. I don't come through Yellowfield often, maybe once every year or two, but this time felt different. I arrived in mid-spring, just after a long winter finally broke. The locals called it the last frost. According to the guy at the loading dock, it marked the start of planting season. The fields were still empty, covered in dried stalks from the last harvest, but the land glowed yellow in the early light. The town felt busy in a way I hadn't seen before. Cars lined the main road, banners hung between streetlights, booths filled the sidewalks, people walked in groups, laughing and talking. I even spotted a few familiar rigs parked near the edge of town, trucks I recognized from the road. That caught my attention. After my delivery, the store manager thanked me and said I'd picked a good week to come through. When I asked why, he smiled. The festival starts tonight. Yellowfield had turned its main strip into a celebration. Booths lined the street, each selling something made from corn. Corn pie, corn chowder, corn bread, corn candy, fried corn on sticks, popcorn in every flavor you could imagine. Someone even had corn beer on tap at the local bar. I didn't hesitate. Truckers live by two rules: carbs and caffeine. This was the carbs part. I tried a little of everything, eating while leaning against railings and chatting with vendors proud to explain how long their families had lived there. I ran into other truckers I knew, guys I'd crossed paths with for years. We compared routes, complained about fuel prices, and decided to stay the night. The festival wasn't something you rushed. As evening settled in, music filled the square. Kids ran around with popcorn. The whole town felt alive, like it had decided to show itself off all at once.